Good morning everyone. Today we are going to see software testing unit 3 session 3. In the previous session we have studied the concept, methodology of performance testing, how to carry out the performance testing steps. In today's session we'll see another topic, regression testing. So when the need of regression testing arises, so the code which is already tested, debugged, and when you want to make the changes in that code, because you find out that some of the functionality is missing, some of the changes you need to do to the coding, to the functionality. Then the code which is already tested, debugged, you make the changes to that. So when you make changes in the coding or in the functionality, it may also affect the other part of the working functionality. So there are chances that it is also going to affect on other working code. So it is very necessary that after making the changes in the code functionalities, we need to also test the other part of the product, other working functionality of the product. So you need to recognize in which areas or in which functions there are chances to occur the defects or it is going to affect. The purpose of regression testing is to confirm that a recent program or code change has not adversely affected existing features. So we need to carry out this testing so that the existing functionality should not affect after making the changes. Regression testing is nothing but full or partial selection of already executed test cases which are re-executed to ensure existing functionalities work fine. So another definition of regression testing is full or partial selection of already executed test cases. So as I told you, the code which is already tested, debugged, and same code again you are going to retest it, because to check out that after making the changes in the code it has not affected that part, and you need to also check out that the code where you have made the changes, even that is necessary to test, and even the other part should not affect. So you need to select the test cases where there are chances of occurring the defects after making the changes. When to do regression testing? A reasonable amount of initial testing is already carried out. So before regression testing, already most of the testing is already done and a good number of defects have been already fixed. Then defect fixes that can produce side effects are taken care of. Now in regression testing, so because of defect fixing after making the changes, it should not affect on other part. So regression testing will be carried out. Knowledge needed to conduct regression test. So the person who is conducting this regression testing should have the knowledge about, requires knowledge about the system and how it affects by the existing functionalities. So that person should know how the system is working, what are the functionalities of that system, and if we change the functionality, any particular functionality, which part of the working functionality it may affect. So that analyzing knowledge that person should have. Tests are selected based on the area of frequent defects. So you are going to select such test cases to carry out this testing where the frequent defects were occurring, and you were fixing it. So mostly if you make any changes, obviously there are the chances that defects may occur. Tests are selected to include the area which has undergone code changes many times. So you are going to also select the test cases from that area where all the time you have kept changing the code and many changes you have done that at that particular function or area. Tests are selected based on the criticality of the features. So you are also going to select the test cases which are very important part of the system, product. So whenever you are making the changes in any functionality, the highest priority functions you are going to test first, and then medium priority, and then lower priority. So the first preference is given to highest priority features after making the changes, because it is the most part which will be used by the customers, users. Next we'll see types of regression testing, regular regression testing and final regression testing. So let us understand first the regression testing with help of an diagram. Now what are these builds? So these builds are nothing but the code which is already compiled, run, debugged and tested, and that is builds, and it is formed as builds. So these builds are nothing but the code which is already compiled, run, debugged and tested. So when you make changes to these builds, means when you add some new features, then again you need to re-execute these builds. You need to again re-execute or retest these builds to verify that it has not affected the existing functionalities, it has not affected the existing builds. Now see, if you make changes in this build, if you add some new features, then again this all previous builds you need to retest to check out it has not affected the existing functionalities of the product which were working fine. And this we call as test cycle 1. If you retest that builds 1, it is a test cycle 1, and then you are going to perform regression testing. Means when you are making the changes and then you are going to perform the regression testing to verify that it is working fine. Similarly, you are also going to test other builds in a test cycle 2, perform regression testing to verify that it has not affected other working part, then perform test cycle 3 and so on. And this we call regular regression types. So when you make changes to any particular build and when you retest it, it is like a regular regression types. And what is final regression types? When at a time when you test all the builds, then it is a final regression testing. So in a final regression testing, all builds will be tested. Let us see the definition. Regression testing, regular regression type, it is a regular regression type. Is done to validate the product builds between test cycle. See, wherever you are making the changes in any of the product builds, you are going to verify that it has not affected that builds. To ensure that enhancements or defect fixes that are done and the functionality that are working with the earlier test cycles continue to work fine. It can use more than one product build for test cases to be executed. So it can be one build tested or more than one build can be tested to verify that it is working fine. It is also used for making intermediate releases. Next is final regression testing, is done to validate the final build before release. So in this, all builds will be tested in final build to ensure that the same build of the product that was tested reaches the customer. More critical than any other type of testing. Used to get a comfort feeling on the product prior to release. It's conducted for a specific period of time, duration, that is called cook time. So before releasing the product in the market, the final build, all builds will be tested once more and then it will be released in the market. Now we'll see how to do regression testing. So there are various methods to perform the regression testing. So first one we'll see performing an initial smoke or sanity test. So to perform this regression testing, first you need to perform sanity test or smoke test. So it consists of identifying the basic functionality that the product must satisfy. So for this, first of all, you need to identify which are the main functionalities of the product and which are very important to work. So those functionalities you need to identify here and whether those are working or no. Designing test cases to ensure that these basic functionality work and packaging them into a smoke test suite. So after identifying basic functionalities, you need to design the test cases to ensure that after making the changes, they work properly. So these all functions are put into one test suite. Means at a time these all functions are run. Every time each functionality is not tested. So these all important functions which are very necessary are put into one test suite and they are run together and tested together at a time. Ensuring that every time a product is built, this suite is run successfully before anything else is run. So every time the product is built, so it is like now build, test suite is like a build where all functionalities have been put and they are run together. So whenever you make any changes to that, it is going to be run at a time so that you will understand after making the changes whether all functionalities are working properly or not. If this suite fails, developers identify the changes. Smoke testing depends on uncovering of such errors introduced by the build procedures. So after making the changes, when you run all these functionalities together, so this test suite is like a build. So when this build is run together, you'll understand after making changes it is working or no, all functionality working or no. We'll see some of the criteria to select test cases for regression testing. Now you need to identify the points from where you are going to select the test cases to conduct this regression testing. So include test cases that have produced maximum defects in the past. So include the test cases which has produced maximum defects in the past. So you need to see the history, back history, past history, and you need to select based on your experience. You can select test cases to conduct this regression testing. Include test cases for functionality in which change has been made. Yes, for which functionality you have made the change, that functionality you include. Based on that functionality you include the test cases. Include test cases in which problems are reported. So in which problems were reported earlier, include the test cases from those functionalities. Include test cases that test the basic functionality. So include test cases which are mostly used by the users. Include test cases to test the positive test conditions. So you need to include the test cases which indicates positive testing, that is valid data. Include the area which is highly visible to the users. From that part you select. Next method is classifying the test cases into different priorities. So after identifying which test cases to select, now you need to classify them. Which test cases are very important, which test cases are medium important and less important. So you need to prioritize these test cases now into higher priority, medium priority and lower priority. So prioritize the test cases depending on their importance, business impact, frequently used functionalities. Selection of test cases based on priority will greatly reduce the regression test suite. So to prioritize these test cases, you need to identify its importance, business impact and frequently used functionalities. Based on this, you can prioritize the test cases which you already identified. Okay, you can start with the priority 0. Okay, includes test cases when basic functionalities changes. So mostly put the test cases into this about the basic functionality. Priority 1, normal setup, the test cases which includes from the setup and all, like configurations and all, resources related test cases. Next is selected on a need basis. So this is the diagram which shows classifying of the test cases. Like you'll understand in priority 1, 10% test cases are there, in priority 2, 25 test cases and so on. So you can start with priority 0 or 1. So in priority 1, test cases, sanity test cases with basic functionality includes and run for acceptance and for change, delivers a very high project value. So in this first test case, a very important high priority test cases will be included here, all the basic functionalities and the test cases which are needed for the acceptance and the test cases which are needed for delivering the products and all. Then next priority is like medium priority, like selects the test cases from basic normal setup and delivers high project value, high probability of getting selected for regression. So from this you are going to select. Next, third priority is like low priority and all. So uses extended setup, moderate project value, some functional and non-functional test cases falls into this category. So these priority are like to improve the quality of that changed functionality, the functionality which have changed. You are going to check out again how is the quality of that. So you are going to identify the priorities, priority 1, 2 and 3 and all. So methodology for selecting test cases. So there is a methodology for selecting test cases based on the criticality and impact of defect fixes. Like in low and medium and high. How is the criticality of the defect fixes? Now this is the diagram for methodology for selecting test cases. Now this diagram shows priority 1, 2 and 3. Test cases are divided into priority 1, 2 and 3. So this icon indicates very few test cases. This icon indicates all test cases. And this icon indicates a subset of test cases. Now if the criticality and impact of defect fixes are low, then if the criticality is also is low and impact is also low of defect fixes, then select very few test cases from priority 1, very few test cases from priority 2 and very few test cases from priority 3. And if the criticality and impact is medium of defect fixes, then select all test cases from priority 1, all test cases from priority 2 and very few from priority 3. And if criticality and impact is high of defect fixing, then select all test cases from priority 1, from priority 2 and a subset of test cases from priority 3. So this is how you are going to identify, recognize to impact of defect fixing which arises on the product. Resetting test cases. The result of a test case can be guessed by looking at history. That is, considering test case results history, rerun and reset test. So looking at the history of the test case, how it has performed, then you are going to rerun it and again reset it. If you want to make again any changes, you can reset it. Mostly the priority 0 includes component test cycle, next includes integration test cycles and priority 2 includes system test cycles. So when to do resetting test cases means when you want to again reset that test case. When there is a major change in the product, if you are changing the test case, when there is a change in the build procedure that affects the product, in a large release cycle where some test cases have not been executed for a long time. When you are in a final regression test cycle with a few selected test cases, and in a situation in which the expected result could be quite different from history. So in these all cases, you can change the test cases by looking at the history and current result. You can change the test cases. Concluding results of regression testing. So this is the last part of the last method of the regression testing. So now after identifying test cases, after analyzing it and after prioritizing it, dividing it and after identifying criticality and impact of defect fixes, now you need to come to the conclusion and the result of this regression testing. That is, if the results of a particular test case was a pass in using previous builds and a fail in current build. So what can be the result of this? So we'll understand this with help of a table. Now this is the previous result and this is the after making changes result. So in the previous build, if the result was pass and now after making changes, if the result is fail, then you need to come to the conclusion that functionality is not working, it is failed. Now if the previous result was fail and after making changes, if it is pass, then you need to come to the conclusion the result is pass, functionality is working. Now if the previous result was fail and after making changes also it is failed, then the conclusion is it is not working, functionality, it is failed. Now the previous result was also passed and after making changes also if it is passed, then that functionality is passed, it is working properly. So in today's topic we have studied about the regression testing and all, what is regression testing types and what are the steps to carry out the regression testing, why the regression testing is necessary and so on. In the next topic we will see some new topic. Thank you.